Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The Standard is the Standard. And joining me on this episode of The Standard is the Standard, we have film breakdown connoisseur Jeffrey Benedict of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com that does a fantastic job on the website of breaking down film and doing a great job with film study. Jeffrey, welcome to the program once again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lance.
If you guys didn't check out our last podcast, we did a fantastic podcast. Jeff broke down Minkah Fitzpatrick. And if you can find that on the streaming feed, do a search for Lance Williams, Jeffrey Benedict, Minkah Fitzpatrick. You can find it that way. Make sure you subscribe to the program, like the program before we jump into it, because we got a lot of nuggets that we want to jump into it. Want to thank everybody in the live chat. Want to thank the oracle of the website and the editor, Dave Schofield. Want to thank his brother, Big Bro Sco, Who's Bad, Brian Anthony Davis, Mike, Tony Defio, the whole team that brings you fantastic Steeler content. So let's jump right into it. And the name of this program, listeners, is Why Steeler Fans Should Be Optimistic About Devin Bush. So let's jump into the first question. What are Devin Bush's strengths? What does he bring to this football team?
I think first off, athleticism. He's an incredible athlete. Quickness, agility, he's got all of it. Another strength of his is vision. He's great. He sees the play in front of him. He reads what's going on with the offense and reacts to it quickly. I would separate that from football intelligence. He learns very quickly. You see, he has a high level of understanding of what's going on in front of him and with the defense. Not just that he sees it, but he really understands it. He watches a lot of film, that kind of thing. And my last one is his learning curve, which is to me his big thing is how fast he picked up the position at an NFL level.
And point to your article. We talked off air. You said you had an article that I believe you had written where you demonstrate that from a film perspective of his learning curve and his ability to learn so rapidly.
Yeah, that's actually coming out tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, that's going to come out on the site. And really what I was showing is if you take a lot of plays from when he was early in the season, when he was biting on play action really hard, and they're just like, especially in the San Francisco game, they're just throwing over his head. They're faking the handoff and throwing over his head all game. And I talked about it in during the season where, they're going to keep going to that. Like Seattle went to that, scored a touchdown over him to Will Disley. San Francisco did it all game. Cincinnati did it. And then you saw Baltimore start doing it. And he got that interception off Nick Boyle where they threw it over Devin Bush. And Nick Boyle started to catch it, and Devin Bush took it out of his hands. It was an interception. And after that, teams stopped throwing that. They stopped running those tight end seam routes and just throwing over Devin Bush's head because they know there's a chance you're going to hit the tight end and he's just going to take it away from him. There was also outside runs. He got better defending outside runs as the season went on. Early on, you could see he was chasing the running back. And then about halfway through the season, you start seeing him start to get in front of the running back. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you think of like how Ray Lewis used to do it, where he would get to where the running back was trying to go before the running back would.
Right.
That's kind of what Devin Bush started doing. He started being able to pick up where those holes were, get to him, and all of a sudden the running back's like, oh, there's my hole. And then Devin Bush is like right there in his face. Not, just running sideways, trying to take an angle and giving him an outside run, but just right there in front of him, making the running back try to get around him. And he really improved that way.
Now, it's good that you talk about his learning curve because I want to jump back into that and a question that I have later in the interview. So what we're going to do, listeners, for you is based on Jeffrey's answers, we're going to try to frame it in terms of why the Steelers should be optimistic. So based on his strengths, Jeffrey, why should the Steelers be optimistic about Devin Bush as a player?
Well, a guy with his athleticism, right? The sky's the limit. I mean, we see that with TJ Watt. Like, he is such an athlete that the smarter he gets, the more moves he gets, the faster he reads the offense. Like, he has the speed, he has the strength, he has the athleticism to make plays. Devin Bush has that athleticism. He has the ability to read the defense. He sees what's going on the field really well. He was a playmaker as a rookie, and that's just going to increase. In my opinion, that's only going to increase this coming season even. And also with his learning curve, I think a big deal of his learning curve is there's almost nowhere to exploit this young man. Like, he is one of the younger players in the NFL. He's 22 this season. He's going to be 22 years old. And he got rid of his flaws. Like, all the ways teams could attack him disappeared last season. He solved them in season. So coming into this season, it's just like getting better than he already was. And he was already, in my opinion, one of the better inside linebackers in the league by the end of the season.
Well, based on that analysis, Steeler fans should be absolutely optimistic. And I love the point that you made. And it's when athleticism and football IQ match up, especially when you're an elite athlete. That's when you can take the next step, and that's when you can be an elite player. That's when you can be a player like a Ray Lewis. You can be a player like Ryan Shazier. You can be an elite player because you have that knowledge and you have that athleticism. Now, on the flip side, let's take a look at Devin Bush's weaknesses. What were some of the weaknesses that you identified on film?
Really, like I said, early in the season, he had quite a few. He had quite a lot of them, but they just kept getting removed from his game. You know, he got better at getting on tight ends and staying in the right position. By the second half of the season, you see play action plays where he comes up, but by the time the quarterback turns around from faking the handoff, Devin Bush has dropped 5 yards, and he's dropping into his position, and there's nothing gained by the play action at that point. By the end of the season last year, the weaknesses he had was he's short and he's smaller. Like, he's not going to LaVon Kirkland somebody. He's going to run into an offensive lineman. He's given up 80 pounds. But at the same time, like, even that, you're talking about that being a weakness. Week 3 last season, he took on Kyle Juszczyk, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, the like all-world fullback, one of the best fullbacks the league has seen, who's a phenomenal blocker. He comes up, hits Kyle Juszczyk, and still makes the tackle. Like, he got blocked by one of the better fullbacks in the league, still makes the tackle. He's not going to take on 320-pound guys with 32, 33-inch arms and be able to do much if they get a hand on it, if they get a hold of him. But you also see him being really hard for them to get a hold of. There's plays where he's right there with them, but he's just agile, he's shifty, and he's moving away from them. They can't get him. And he just goes and makes the tackle. Or he can get around him, he can get under him. Like, there's ways he can get past them. But on plays where they get him, if they get a hand in him, if they get a hand on his chest, if they get a hold of him, he's done. I mean, he's not going to wrestle an offensive lineman. The other thing is with his height, there's a couple of plays you see him drop back, especially off play action. A couple times he dropped back and they threw over his head. And you see him jump and, like, the ball's like half an inch above his fingers. And you're like, well, if he was 6'1", you know, and had an inch longer arm because of that,
right,
that's an interception. He's just not going to be able to get to some things. He's going to have a harder time doing it. And when he does deal with people throwing over him with tight ends, like he did in the Baltimore game, he attacked the ball as the tight end was trying to bring it in. Like, he can't get up there at the catch point if the tight end's extended up. He's just too short. So that's really his big weakness.
And that's interesting that you say that, because that was some of the things that draft nicks and draft pundits pointed out, is that he just in general is small in stature. But again, I'm going to throw it back to the question that we're talking about with this particular show. Given the weaknesses that you've laid out, why should Steeler fans be optimistic still about Devin Bush within that context?
I think how they used him, his ability to adapt to the situation and overcome his weaknesses is a big part. But I would be optimistic because the Steelers found ways to better use him as the season went on. Instead of him covering people deep, we saw more use of what's called pattern matching zone. Words just slipped my mind. Where you got 3 guys on one side and you got 3 defenders lined up there, and Devin Bush is the guy on the inside slot guy, or the tight end there. If they run that guy deep, instead of having Devin Bush cover him, one of the cornerbacks takes that guy, and Devin Bush takes whoever comes to the inside. So he doesn't have to leave that area. Like, he's not trying to cover someone deep. He's right there covering an underneath route, which plays directly into his strengths of lateral movement. He can stay with those guys.
And what he's describing, listeners, if you can't envision it, think of the New England Patriots that ran a ton of crossers, maybe about 7 to 10 yards deep. And they run a lot of crossers at your face. And what they want you to do is chase the crossers to create natural picks or natural rubs. And just think of Edelman killing, and I don't know why I'm forgetting his name, the line, Lawrence Timmons. Just think of Edelman killing Lawrence Timmons on underneath crossers when the Steelers are running man instead of pattern matching and passing off that action underneath. So you just run and chase the guy that crosses your face. And so to what you're saying, that makes perfect sense in terms of Devin Bush and how they utilize him. And I'm glad you talked about how they utilize him, because I think that leads to the next question was, how were the Steelers utilizing him over the course of the season? What packages, and kind of how did that morph and change as he began to develop as a player?
They used him anytime there were two inside linebackers. If there were two inside linebackers, he was one of them. Except really early in the season, they did do some Mark Barron and Vince Williams packages, which didn't work well. And pretty quickly, that got switched to Devin Bush and Vince Williams, and then Mark Barron was the dime backer. So you saw a lot of Devin Bush in nickel. You also saw him some in the bigger 3-4 set, but not a lot. Not a lot. That was where you mostly saw the Barron and Vince Williams combination. And even as the season went on, one of the interesting things I found from that is, instead of going to, a 3-4 look and then going bigger to like a 4-4 look, when teams went really big, like when the Baltimore Ravens were putting in an extra offensive lineman, an extra tight end, and there's like one wide receiver out there, they're in a jumbo package. The Steelers would counter that with 3 defensive linemen, both Bud Dupree and TJ Watt, and then they would have all 3 of the inside linebackers on the field at once. There was a few times they went, their nickel is usually, 2 defensive linemen, Bud Dupree and TJ Watt on the outside, and then 2 inside linebackers. There were a couple of times where they would go with 3 of the bigger defensive linemen, like a 3-man front, and then they would have 3 linebackers behind them for like the old 3-3 look. And in really long yardage, you could have like Cam Hayward, Bud Dupree, and TJ Watt up front, and then all 3 linebackers behind them, all 3 of the middle linebackers behind them. That Devin Bush got in on those, but his major usage was in nickel, and that was the big one. Mark Barron was the dime backer. When he was out, when he missed the game week 6, Devin Bush played in the dime, and they kind of just put him into Mark Barron's role, and he didn't do well in it. But that was game week 6. By the end of the season, he had improved a lot in those areas. So thinking about like how, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm getting off track.
It's fine. It's fine. What I think you're illustrating is that he's very versatile. And because he's a very versatile linebacker, naturally the Steelers and Steeler fans should be very optimistic about him because of his athleticism, his smarts, his versatility. He could be used in a variety of packages, which makes him an every down linebacker, and you can put him in a lot of different situations. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think last year you wrote an article about the Steelers using a 3-5 look, where you had 3 down linemen and 5 linebackers. If you did not, just illustrate the flexibility that gives the Steelers defense when they put 5 linebackers on the field, where they have the 3 inside linebackers in Vidi Vici, Bush, Barron that they did last year, and they have TJ and Bud Dupree on the field. Just go into a little more detail about that, when they sort of used it and what type of flexibility that provided the Steelers, and just how good Devin Bush was in that role, in that particular alignment.
Yeah, that was a really good set for the Steelers. They actually did quite well out of it, because a lot of times, especially with Baltimore loves doing that. San Francisco did it a bit to us, but they'll go with that big, heavy set, and then they'll throw the ball, because Baltimore has 3 tight ends, so they can put 3 tight ends out there, and you're like, okay, they're going to pound the ball. So we get all our big guys out there, and then they run a pass play, and those tight ends are going deep because you don't have the defensive backs to cover them. And in those sets, Mark Barron and Devin Bush were incredibly valuable because they could cover those guys. They could cover the most athletic tight ends. They could cover wide receivers in a pinch, really good route running backs. They could cover them. And, you know, you're kind of protecting Vince Williams a bit. He doesn't have to do as much. And so, and even if you have, you know, Bud Dupree and TJ Watt need to drop into coverage in a situation where that, like, they're only going to rush 4 and one of those guys needs to drop, they can do it. It gave a lot of versatility, and it also put Devin Bush in one of my favorite spots for him, which is the middle linebacker role. Instead of an inside like Mack or Buck linebacker, the middle linebacker role, more of a 4-3 type of middle linebacker look. He is so good in those looks, which really allowed the Steelers to do a 3-3 formation, or like you said, a 3-5, where when they line up, it's kind of like the old 5-3 Eagle, defense,
Right.
where he kind of plays that middle linebacker role. And no matter if you run to the outside, you know, the linebacker on the outside can come up and handle, you know, blocking the fullback or the tight end, and Devin Bush is free to run. And that's where he really shines, is anytime you have Devin Bush near the line of scrimmage, eyes on the play, not turning around to follow a running back or a tight end or a wide receiver, but he has his eyes on the whole play. He is deadly. He's so good at that. Very similar to a Minkah Fitzpatrick. We have 2 people in the middle that if they are just watching the play and able to attack forward, they're incredible. Where Devin Bush actually, in my opinion, is stronger attacking laterally, so he can watch the play and it's like, oh, the play's going to the right side of the field. Well, yeah, Devin Bush is going to be there to meet it. If it's going to the left side of the field, Devin Bush is going to get there and meet it. Wherever it's going, he's going to find that play. And so when he has his eyes on the quarterback, eyes on the play, he is incredibly good. And that's why he fits so well with Mark Barron, is because Mark Barron could take the jobs where he's chasing a tight end around or he's chasing a running back around and in route running, and Devin Bush is able to watch the play and just read what's going on. People coming underneath into his zone, running back slipping out late. He destroyed those plays.
Let me ask you a question, because you've mentioned Mark Barron numerous times. Do you think Mark Barron is the perfect complement? That type of linebacker is a great complement for Barron. And do you think Ulysses Gilbert III could be that type of player to complement Devin Bush like Mark Barron? Or could you foresee the Steelers possibly trying to give Mark Barron a cheap deal and bringing Mark Barron back to slot him back on this defense?
I could see them giving a shot for Mark Barron to come back, but I think Devin Bush is ready to take over the dime back role. And if he's a linebacker in dime and in nickel and in the bigger sets, like, there's not a lot of snaps to go around. So if Mark Barron came back here, it would be not just for less money, but it would be for a significantly reduced role. And I really don't see that happening. I think Tomlin is the kind of guy who would be up front with him and be like, oh, we'll take you back, but you're not going to play as much. You're just not. You're not going to be the dime guy. Devin Bush has taken that because I think he'll be better at that than him. And that's one of the reasons I think Ulysses S. Gilbert can fill that role, is because it's not a big role. It's going to be some nickel. It's going to be some, 3 linebacker packages. Some of those roles are going to be open for Ulysses Gilbert. But most of the time, it's Devin Bush is going to be on the field as much as they possibly can. He's going to be on field. If he's healthy enough to be out there, he's going to be out there. And
so who's going to play more snaps next to him next year? Is it going to be Vince? Is it going to be Ulysses Gilbert? Before I jump into our next Devin Bush question, who's going to play more snaps next year as that second inside linebacker position? Because I think we both agree that Devin Bush is going to play. He's going to be on the field as much as Terrell Edmunds is. I mean, he's going to play a ton of snaps in all the packages, because between Minkah, Edmunds, TJ Watt, and Devin Bush, you put freaky athletic guys on the field, And the more athletic guys, and Bud Dupree is another freaky athletic guy. You put freaky athletic guys on the field, you coach them up, you let them go run and hunt and hit and just create havoc. Who's the guy that's going to play more snaps? Is it going to be Gilbert, or is it going to be Vidi Vici, Vince Williams? Who plays more snaps next year as that other inside linebacker?
I'm going to go with Vince Williams. I'm a huge Vince fan as a person. I don't think he fit the best with Devin Bush, but I think they've had enough time together to try and kind of figure that out better. And I think Bush has done a better job of playing off of the guy next to him. Early in the season, it was like whoever was in there with him, they were just racing to the ball carrier. You know, they weren't playing smart together. They were often like running into each other, chasing the ball carrier. I think Devin Bush has gotten smarter about that, and I think he will play better with Vince Williams. Vince also, I constantly talk about, he's not good in coverage. But when he's not good in coverage, that doesn't mean he can't cover anybody. Like if it's a number 2 tight end or a not as athletic tight end, Vince Williams can cover him. If it's a slower running back, not a great not a great route running back, he can handle that. He doesn't have a problem with those guys. It's when you get, a Travis Kelce on there. If you put Vince Williams on a Travis Kelce, you're going to have a very, very long day. And we saw that. We saw that 2018 with the Chiefs, where Kelce just ran down the middle of the field and was open every play.
Yeah, that's murder. That is you get arrested for that. That you could get some time. That could be considered a crime in most jurisdictions. On
those plays coming in 2020, I would expect to see, if we're facing a team with a more athletic tight end that's giving us problems, I would expect to see them either use Ulysses Gilbert or use an extra safety, or even just move Terrell Edmunds into more of a linebacker role, which is another thing I could see, is the Steelers actually running a dime look, but kind of using Terrell Edmunds more as a linebacker and putting one of the other defensive backs like a Cam Sutton deeper, and just being like, yeah, we'll roll dime, but it's kind of nickel. Terrell Edmunds is out there and he can kind of play that linebacker role. Him and Mark Barron were very similar size, athletic profiles, and Edmunds, frankly, was better than Mark Barron at it. So I could see them in a pinch putting Terrell Edmunds up there and saying, hey, you're going to fill that Mark Barron role and let Devin Bush just do his thing.
It sounds like the flexibility of Edmunds may prevent Barron from coming back, because he's big enough and athletic enough to be in the box and fill up some of those roles with Gilbert. And so he becomes sort of your slash inside linebacker in certain packages with Gilbert and with Bush. Let me jump into our next question. And you were talking about the progression of Devin Bush over the course of the season. So often coaches look at the season in terms of quarters. So I want to look at it in terms of quarters. And I don't know if you want to give me just one word to describe where he was in terms of where his progression was. But in the first 4 games, just describe how much he progressed in the first 4.
Okay, just inside the first 4 games.
In the first 4 games.
In the first 4 games, he was a rookie, man. He was making some plays. He was making plays on the run game. He was making some decent coverage, but he was vulnerable in the first quarter to play action. He was getting beat by tight ends. He was even getting beat on outside runs. He was not the player he was after that. The first 4 games was actually his roughest patch.
Now, from the first 4 games to the halfway point, describe his growth as a player from game 4 to game 8. What did you see as a difference from his play in that 4-game progression?
Well, you see in that span, the interception in Baltimore, where tight ends stopped being able, like teams basically stopped throwing that route. That play happened, and it went from a staple play you saw run against the Steelers to other teams just being like, no, we're not even gonna, if he's on that guy, just don't throw it somewhere else. You see him start to get better on the outside runs. But that'll come later. And the big change you see there is the bye week, which is right before, right in the middle of that, there coming to the middle point of the season. you see the defense start to change a lot. That's when the team really adjusted to Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that's also when they kind of fit Devin Bush into a better role as well. So I would say the second quarter of the season, you saw Devin Bush answer the problem with covering tight ends, and you saw the team start using him more to his strengths.
Now let's look at the third quarter. So going from the halfway point, that week 8 game, to week 12, describe his development there.
At that point, he has become a playmaker. At that point, he is a very solid player. He's answered almost all of his problems. All of his flaws are gone pretty much. And he is really just solid at that point.
So from game 12 to game 16, has he just completely turned the curve, and now he's playing instinctual and he's playing fast and he looks like a vet on film? Describe his progression from week 12 or game 12 to game 16. What did it look like to you?
Those last 4 games, he was an absolute monster. The team had worked more to get him out of roles where he's turning his back to the play, where he's worried about covering the tight end, where they're leaving him more in the middle. This is also the time of the season where teams were running on us. Teams were just like, we're not even going to try throwing it. We're just going to run the ball on you. And at the same point that we are facing the most runs of any team in the NFL late in the season, we're giving up less and less yardage as Devin Bush is just destroying teams' run game. And you would see teams start to focus on running out of dime sets. Like they would put a bunch of receivers out just to get Devin Bush off the field, which is another reason I really think like the Steelers next year, Devin Bush has to be the dime backer, because teams were like, okay, if we're going to run on the Steelers, we need to do it we need to get them into dime first and get Devin Bush off the field. One of the interesting points is, for me, the first half of the season, the Steelers were the 16th best team. We gave up the 16th lowest yards per carry on runs to the outside. They were right in the middle of the pack, right in the middle of the whole league. The second half of the season, they dropped from giving up 5 yards a carry on outside runs to 2.9 yards per carry, which was the lowest in the NFL. They went from middle of the road to number 1 in the NFL, and that was almost entirely due to Devin Bush getting better and the Steelers making sure he's there in a position to make those plays.
Now, given his progression, let's go back to the question that we asked at the top of the program, is why Steeler fans should be optimistic about Devin Bush. Why should Steelers be optimistic about Devin Bush as you articulate his progression as a first-year player?
I'm gonna for this, I'm gonna reference the guy I compared him to when he was drafted. Watching his film, watching him play, I compared him because a lot of people were asking, like, oh, is he another Ryan Shazier? Is he going to be a James Ferrier? And my thoughts watching him play is he reminds me so much of Ray Lewis when Ray Lewis was brand new in the league. Not 2000 Ray Lewis. I'm talking like a couple years before that when he was brand new, and he was just everywhere. No matter where the ball went, he was there. He was going to find the ball on every play. And that's kind of what Devin Bush plays like. He just gets there. He's not the hitter Ray Lewis was. I mean, it's a different league. Devin Bush has to be in coverage more than Ray Lewis ever would had to be. And he's going to not be the hitter Ray Lewis was. But he tackles people. Like, he doesn't miss tackles. He is there in front of the running back. Like, you just heard Ray Lewis, they talk about how he beat the running back to his spot. Like, the running back is going to get to this spot and then head upfield. And Ray Lewis is there to meet him. Devin Bush was doing that. The Buffalo game, the New York Jets game, he was meeting people at the spot where that running back was trying to get to. The offensive line has a hole cleared, and Devin Bush is just there. And it's going to be incredible having him on the team. One of my other favorite stats that I bring up in my article tomorrow is last year in 2018, not 2019, 2018, Sean Davis, the free safety who played deep safety almost every play, was tied for third on the team in run tackles, tied with John Bostic. Like, John Bostic is our big inside linebacker, and Sean Davis had as many solo run stops as John Bostic did. This year with Devin Bush replacing John Bostic, Minkah Fitzpatrick was 11th on the team in tackles on run plays. Devin Bush had more than twice as many as Minkah Fitzpatrick. So that's a big sign. Like, runs were getting deep. Runs were getting past the linebackers,
Right.
and you had safeties coming up and having to make tackles just to keep the gain down. You know, they were making tackles. If your free safety is tackling a running back, that's not a good play. That's just not a good play. And you're also going to get more broken tackles. You get Devin Bush in there. Devin Bush is eating those run plays, and they just don't get that far.
Let's jump into the last question, or our last couple of questions, and then we're going to turn it over to the live chat. And this touches on, you said how he was a very smart player and how he was able to eliminate, his mistakes. What's his ceiling? And how do you think he'll progress next year? And but before I finish though, because someone in the live chat brought it up, this is a very weird year for the preparation of a football team with the pandemic and COVID-19.
Yes.
Where you think he'll be in his progression? How much do you think he'll progress? And will this weird season of preparing a football team in COVID-19 hamper his progression as a player?
It probably will, but I don't think we'll notice that. And one of the reasons is he's in a good spot. The end of last season, he was in a good spot to start the next season and be a Pro Bowl, maybe even competing for an all-pro linebacker spot. Losing the offseason will hurt his development some, but the way he adapted week to week, the way he improved week to week, I don't think it's going to hurt him much. He was playing more like a veteran. I don't think you can treat him like a normal second-year player. Like if you take Terrell Edmunds, we saw Terrell Edmunds improve in year 2. He got rid of some of the flaws from year 1, but he still carried some of them with him. Devin Bush got rid of those in year 1 as a 21-year-old rookie, as the youngest player in the NFL. I don't think he's going to start. Yeah, he's going to be 22.
Wow.
And in my opinion, he's going to be possibly the best middle linebacker in the AFC. He could compete for that. He's incredible. I keep saying that, but I'm incredibly excited by him. As for his ceiling, I'm not even going to hazard a ceiling for him because I have no clue. We saw him eliminate his weaknesses and, in my opinion, become close to all-pro level by the end of the season. Like, he's that kind of a player to me. I can't even begin to think where he could end up. He could be a Ray Lewis. He could be that kind of generational talent, first ballot Hall of Fame guy. I don't think he'll ever get the recognition you saw Ray Lewis gets because I don't think he's the vocal guy. He's never going to be like, oh, we're playing the Steelers. Devin Bush, you're playing Devin Bush and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I have to take a knock at Ray a little bit either. I don't think we'll see him using deer antler ointment as well.
Hopefully we don't see him having to apologize for, having a murder investigation involve him either.
Yes.
Yeah, like I hope we don't see that stuff. But Devin Bush, what Ray Lewis did on the field, Devin Bush could become that type of player. That type of player.
Now, before we jump into and big up, let me jump into the Steelers super chat here because I do want to mention this. Bradley James, thank you for the $1.99. He said, "Big up to the Steagles looking gear." It is actually the St. Patty's Day gear. So the hoodie that I have on is a St. Patty's Day hoodie. You can't really see it because my name is blocking it. But this is the St. Patty's Day hoodie with the St. Patty's Day hat. I like to switch it up for you guys and keep you guys guessing. Before we jump into, I want to jump into one live chat question because Alfred Fujisaki is my de facto co-host. I really like Alfred's questions, so I always bump Alfred's questions before everyone else if there isn't a super chat. And Alfred said, Shazier's second-year jump was really impressive. Do you think Bush has a similar jump, or do you think he'll improve even more than Shazier in year 2? And just do We love Ryan Shazier. I thought Ryan Shazier was a really good player. I thought Ryan had some issues, some significant issues to his game. Compare the two and speak to Alfred Fujisaki's question about the year 2 jump for Devin Bush.
Okay. Shazier and Devin Bush are very different players. Ryan Shazier, when he started to shine, was when he stopped trying to be a normal middle linebacker and just attack people. Shazier was just incredible when he was aggressive, when he was just attacking the play forward, vertically, just bam, hitting holes, going through people, making plays in the backfield. That's where he really started to shine. Devin Bush is more of a lateral player. So it's more like Shazier would blow up a play, but he'd also miss a play that would get outside of him or outside.
Absolutely.
Devin Bush is more the player that he's not going to miss plays. He's going to get there. He's going to find the ball. He won't make many splash plays. Enforcing fumbles, getting sacks, stuff like that, like Shazier did. But we already saw Devin Bush. If the ball's on the ground, Devin Bush is on it. Like if the ball's tipped up in the air, Devin Bush is flying to it. Like he can be a playmaker in that regard, but he's not going to be living in the opponent's backfield as much as Ryan Shazier does. And if he ends up doing that, then he's going to be an incredible player. If he can do what he does and also start making a lot of plays in the backfield, he'll be incredible.
Now, in our last interview, we talked about Minkah Fitzpatrick and just how much of a fit Minkah was for this defense and just how important Minkah is to this defense and how sort of the Minkah effect took this defense to the next level. It was the perfect complement, perfect match, perfect fit, and it took the defense to this other lofty level that we think that this defense is. How vital is Devin Bush to this defense? And speak to having 3 elite athletes in the middle of your defense. You're talking about Devin Bush, you're talking about Edmonds, and you're talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick. Speak to that dynamic and just how vital is Devin Bush to this defense. If the Steelers if Devin Bush were to be injured for several games, could they recover? How could they be? Just how vital is Devin Bush to this defense? And speak to the dynamic of having very athletic players in the middle of your defense.
Well, if you remember last week, you asked me about if Minkah gets too much or too little credit. And I said, I kind of hedged and said both. Like he deserves a ton of credit. But the other player I mentioned that deserved a lot of credit is Devin Bush. And I'm going to stand by that and say Devin Bush is incredibly important. I think Minkah Fitzpatrick is more important because we don't have anyone else that can be a really good deep free safety if he's not on the field. And, you know, if Devin Bush isn't there, run plays are going to get 2, 3, 4 more yards. You're going to see more big runs. You're going to see more tight ends giving us trouble. If Minkah Fitzpatrick is out, you're going to see guys throwing deep and getting touchdowns. So I think there's a different scale there in their value. But Devin Bush is very, very important to this defense for taking it to the next level. And as you said, with the athletes, having Terrell Edmonds and Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of in the middle at safety and strong safety and free safety, Devin Bush at middle linebacker, that's incredibly hard for defenses to attack the Steelers with, especially with as good as Minkah is attacking forward into the middle of the defense and as strong as Devin Bush is attacking from the middle outside and also attacking middle runs and defending short passes over the middle. It takes away the middle of the field, the entire length of it, the entire from the line of scrimmage out as far as you can go. The middle of the field is really gone. It's just not somewhere you can attack, and that's the best places to attack. They did a whole statistical analysis and showed that the middle of the field was by far the most important part to defend, and the Steelers have that. And not only do they have those 3, I'll add in with having elite athletes is we've got Bud Dupree and TJ Watt as well. So it's, if you try to go outside, you've got Bud Dupree, you've got TJ Watt, and you've also got Devin Bush and Terrell Edmonds who run down a lot of plays to the sideline where, you escaped Bud Dupree. but you're out of bounds because Devin Bush and Terrell Edmonds are right there, and they're not letting you turn the corner. They're all incredible. This defense is set up to be ridiculous next season.
Yeah, when you look at it, let me jump into a super chat here. They are so athletic. They are so talented on that side of the ball. Want to thank Dave Shipley for the $2. Thank you, Dave. And also want to jump into this $5 from Snowman. I did not know this, and I should. Happy 87th birthday to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and happy 68th birthday to the great middle linebacker Jack Lambert. So it is truly an awesome day in Steelerland, July 8th. I did not know that. Did you know that, Jeffrey, that today was the Steelers organization birthday?
No, I did not. I did not know that. But then I can't remember
bad.
My own anniversary. I get in trouble all the time.
Well, you can write that down. So let me give you a word of advice. Write that down. Protect the middle of the field and write that down because you don't want to be compromised right down the middle. You got to get one date right in the year. Get that date right.
My children actually remind me now. My children will remind me, so I'm okay.
Jeffrey, put it in your cell phone. Put it in your cell phone. Write it down. Say it like 10 times and remember. But I feel a little bit bad that I did not know that this was the birthday of the Pittsburgh Steelers because I'm a North Side guy. So the Rooneys are probably, they come from maybe about 10 minutes from where I grew up. So I feel kind of bad being a North Sider as well that I did not know that. But let me jump into a couple of questions here before we get out of here. Andrew Wilbar asked the following question. Can my Michigan man, Devin Bush, be an all-pro in 2020?
Hey, I'm a Michigan man also. I was born in Adrian. Been a University of Michigan fan longer than I even knew professional football was a thing. Devin Bush, yes, he can be an all-pro in 2020. I think he's got a really good shot at it.
Let me ask you, let me jump into this other question. And some of these questions will not be about Devin Bush, but we're going to jump into them anyway. This is from Steelers Fan 1. What about Joe Hayden? How many good years do you think he has left?
He was good last year. I give him at least 2 more at corner. And I also think he is the kind of guy that can move to a safety, move to the slot, change up his position to give him a few more years. He's already lost some speed, but you don't see him get beat. So until he's lost enough speed that he can't make up for it with his, veteran savvy, then that's when he's going to be gone. But I think I give him a couple more years.
Asiatic Noble, this is not a question, but a comment. And tell me, do you think that if this is true or false, that Bush will have around 5 interceptions, 6 forced fumbles, and 5 recoveries in 2020? That's a nice little grab bag right there, 565.
I would not bet against the fumble recoveries. I think that he can reach that pretty easily. Interceptions, I don't know. Teams, they're going to have to throw at somebody. On one hand, I'm like, oh, teams aren't going to throw at Minkah Fitzpatrick. Oh, teams aren't going to throw at Joe Hayden. Teams didn't throw at Steven Nelson last year. Teams aren't going to throw at Devin. They've got to throw at somebody. If the Steelers offense is moving the ball, they have to throw somewhere. He could see that if teams decide that Devin Bush is a guy they want to attack, he could get 5 interceptions. Forced fumbles, that would be an area that would be an improvement. He was not a big fumble forcer. He is more of just a straight wrap tackler. If he can throw in that like a TJ Watt style wrap and then punch, you could see him force more fumbles. That would be a great way for him to improve, and that would definitely put him as a first-team All-Pro.
Yeah, the voters who don't necessarily watch a ton of everybody, if you create those type of splash plays, that'll absolutely get you on an all-pro team. We have a suggestion for you, though, Jeffrey, with your issue about your anniversary. Snowman chimed in and said, tattoo your anniversary on your forehead so you won't forget.
I could get a tattoo of it, get it on like my arm or something, where I'd see it, I'd be like, brush my teeth, be like, oh yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So you could, I know my anniversary. It's August 25th, and I will be 20 years this year, August 25th, 2000. I am hitting 20. So I know, see, I'm well schooled. I know my keys, my key and diagnose, my recognition. By the 3rd quarter of my marriage, I had it locked. I did not make that mistake after year 10. And see, See, so I'm on the Devin Bush route. I am progressing, but a little slower than he did. Alfred Fujisaki jumped back in and asked another question. Does Devin Bush have a better year than Bobby Wagner or Darius Leonard? Does he enter the highest echelon of middle linebackers next year?
I could see him having a better year than Darius Leonard. Hard to have better seasons than Bobby Wagner. But I could see him passing Darius Leonard. I think teams are learning better how to avoid Leonard. And I think with the roster the Steelers have, you're going to have a really hard time avoiding Devin Bush.
I don't know how. I don't think I've seen the guy from Seattle. I don't think I've ever seen Bobby Wagner miss a tackle. I mean, like honestly, and that's not even hyperbole. Like, he's not always there, like making tackles in the backfield, but when he hits you, it's over. The play's erased. It's done. I don't even see guys really falling forward when Bobby Wagner gets a hit. You know how linebackers will hit a guy and their forward progress will still get them another 3. You know, when Bobby Wagner hits you, you know, it's done. It's over. It's finito. Here's another suggestion for you from Russ Obstein. He said, I tattooed my anniversary on my shoulder. So the shoulder's a good look. You can hide it when you want with the very nice Boba Fett t-shirt, or is that Jango Fett? You know, my Star Wars nerd.
This is Boba Fett.
Okay, so your nice Boba Fett t-shirt, it could be right here, you know, just neatly. You know, but here's the thing, though. If you tattoo it, are you going to do European dating? So you're going to go year, month, day, or you're going to go US, just day, month, day, year? Which way would you do it?
Oh, the numbers are low. So it would, like, if I put it European dating, I'd be 3 months off.
Let me jump into another question. This question is from Bradley James. And thank you for the super chat, Bradley. Thank you for the multiple questions in the super chat. Do the Steelers draft another middle linebacker high next year to pair with Bush, given the aging Williams?
I don't think so. I'm a firm believer in Ulysses Gilbert. And again, if you draft a high linebacker, like, a lot of the snaps, he's not going to be on the field. Steelers play a lot of dime. So there's going to be a lot of plays where one of those aren't on the field. And with Devin Bush, it's not going to be him. He's not going to be the one off the field. So if they did draft another linebacker high, I don't know how much value that'd be. That wouldn't be the best value, in my opinion.
And that's the thing I think that we have to consider when you're talking about a number 1 draft pick, especially on a defensive side. I'll say both sides of the football. They have to play, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, or disagree. If you'd like, they're going to have to play close to, I would say, 90% of the snaps, right?
Yeah.
If you're a first-round draft pick, you're going to essentially have to play all the time. You're going to have to play in every package, every alignment, every package, everything, because they're saying you have superior athletic ability, skill, and you're at the top half of the top 1%. So they want you on the field all the time. And that's what we've heard the Steelers talk about with nose tackles, that they don't value them like they used to because they're not 3-down guys. If they are taking a guy in the first or second round, they want that guy on the field all the time. They don't want that guy to be a situational player. And so unless you can play probably, I'm going to guess about 800 snaps, 850 snaps or more, you're not going to be a first round draft pick. And I want to say big up to Asiatic Noble. Thanks for the $6. No question. Steelers Nation, let's go. And that's always what it's about. It's about Steelers Nation. Let me jump into another question. And this is why I call Alfred Fujisaki my co-host, because he has great questions. He might as well host the show for me just from his questions. So big up Alfred again. Does Javon Hargrave's departure cause problems for Devin Bush in 2020? Pretty hard to imagine that his departure won't be felt.
I agree with that. In certain circumstances, Javon Hargrave was incredible against zone run plays. I loved him against zone run plays. More power-oriented plays, they could move him off the ball with a double team. He wasn't an anchor and hold a double team kind of guy. But he was good on zone plays. And when teams would zone run, you would often see Javon Hargrave creating, like he would have a grip on the center, and the center's trying to like get off of him, and he can't. And Devin Bush is shooting through gaps where Javon Hargrave is just not letting people get into those gaps and fill them. That's where a lot of Devin Bush's tackles for a loss came. So you're going to have to see Tyson Alualu fill that kind of a role where he's able to move laterally and keep those double teams on him and not let the double teams get pushed off of him in order to fill in for Javon Hargrave and really fill that role.
You think there's anybody else on the roster outside of Alualu that will get some snaps? Some of the young defensive linemen that they've drafted in the last couple of years. You think those guys will get any snaps in that role as what would that be, like the fifth defensive lineman? If you're talking about the 3-man rotation, the fourth or fifth defensive lineman, maybe the fifth or sixth, some of those guys getting some plays. You think that'll be Wormley? There will be a guy that'll also can play that role that Hargrave did in being able to occupy those double teams against zone runs. You think Wormley or one of the other guys can do that?
I don't expect Wormley. I think Wormley is going to be more outside in the 5 tech positions. He was good there for Baltimore. I expect Alualu is going to be the big guy inside. I would not be surprised if Daniel McCullers does not get snaps. As bad as he is on some plays and as bad as he has been in the past, he was good on a lot of plays last year.
Wait a minute. Stop. Hold. So wait a minute. Stop. Stop. Okay. Slow down. Listeners, you heard what Jeffrey said. He said Daniel McCullers was good on some plays. You got to break that down for me.
You're going to get me killed.
The floor is yours. Please explain that to me. And I want to write down, we're at 51-43 in the interview. Please break that down for me.
Okay. If the play wasn't going laterally, like I said, zone plays where Javon Hargrave was asked to move laterally with the line, Javon Hargrave was at his best in those plays. Daniel McCullers, that's where he would struggle. You saw plays where he actually did okay on that last season, and you saw other plays where it was like he was slow enough that the other guys, like moving with the play to try and keep them from getting an opening, were crashing into on one side and creating a big gap on the other because he was just too slow moving sideways, and he would create openings for running backs just by being slow. But in plays where he wasn't asked to move laterally, in plays where he was asked to just take a double team and hold that double team, he was great at that. And if you try to not double team Daniel McCullers, he will just walk your offensive lineman into the backfield almost every time. So if you try to power run, you don't want to see Daniel McCullers on the other side because you're going to have an offensive lineman in your lap while you're trying to run the ball. He may not make a tackle. He may not do anything good on pass plays, but you don't want to see that man one-on-one in an area where you're trying to run the ball because he's huge. He doesn't get moved, and he was driving people forward last season. So in a very selective role, he has that value. And you'll see that when they pair him in the 2-player sets, they would pair him with Javon Hargrave, and he basically just pushed forward, and Javon Hargrave would make moves, and he would create opportunity for Javon Hargrave to do stuff because they had to deal with Daniel McCullers just like driving the pocket back and just making a big hole in the run game where you just can't go there. He's just this big space eater. So he wasn't terrible.
It's interesting that you say that because the live chat is having a ball. Ezra Nehemiah said, did you say good and McCullers in the same sentence? Panero's 5 Pyru, who actually in his picture has his Michigan stuff on Bloods. He has his Michigan stuff. He's got the Michigan beanie. He's got the hoodie. And big up to Michigan. I got a lot of family from Michigan, but unfortunately, I'm gonna piss you off a little bit, Jeffrey. Here, my family's from East Lansing. We're Sparties. We are Spartans. We are Spartans. Snowman, Daniel McCullers is good. So put it like this, Jeff. You watch enough film we will give you the benefit of the doubt on Daniel McCullers. You know, my personal thought was he had the secret Zapruder film, you know, in his basement, and he had the single bullet theory. He had all that documentation, and somehow he also had pictures of the coaching staff, and that's how he remains on the roster. He's been on the roster for at least 7 years, I think. I mean, he's been he
lasted past his rookie contract, hasn't he?
Yes. So
they like him.
They like him for some reason.
Well,
I mean,
I'll tell you my thought on why he's on the roster is because in goal line sets, you need someone like him. You in short yardage sets, you've got to have that one guy who's just going to be big and unmovable, and he's that guy.
Well, he is a monster. So before we get out of here, Jeff, tease your article once again. Let them know what you're going to be breaking down, and also tell them about the last part of the secondary article. Tell them about that stuff and what you got coming up before we get out of here.
All right. Like you said, my last week after our show, my last part of my secondary evolution film series went on. It was a 5-part series. If you go to Behind the Steel Curtain and search Film Room, those will come up. Tomorrow, my article on Devin Bush comes out. It is called Devin Bush's best attribute is his learning curve. And it's all about showing his improvement from the start of the season to the end of the season. In the future, I've got a series about the tight ends and how the Steelers use them. I'm working on, and I'm also working on a play showing how a very simple film room showing how things that Matt Canada did in college are already being done in the NFL, and how the Steelers might incorporate those similar to some plays we actually saw other teams use against the Steelers last year.
Wow, I want to see that. Definitely. I want to definitely check out that one what Matt Canada is. So thank you, Jeff, for another fantastic interview. And I urge you guys to first, in either particular order, either listen to this show first, then read the article on Devin Bush, or check out the article first, come to the podcast about Devin Bush, but put them together as a package so you can get all the information that you need about Devin Bush from BTSC. We give you fantastic content. Jeff is breaking down the film, putting it on the website. Make sure you check it out there. Tell a friend. Do everything you can to get this awesome content. But Jeff, again, thank you. Thank you, everybody in the live chat. And, next time we do this, we're going to break down Daniel McCullers and how he changes the goal line package and why he is a 7-year Steeler vet. But with that, we are going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.